Two princes were locked inside a tower, and then they vanished. No bodies, no witnesses, no clear answers. More than 500 years later, the question still haunts historians. What really happened to the princes in the tower? Before we uncover this royal mystery, take a second to like the video and subscribe for more fascinating stories from history. It really helps the channel grow. So, now, let's go back to England in the year 1483. England was ruled by the powerful House of York. King Edward IV had fought hard to win the throne during the Wars of the Roses, a brutal conflict between rival royal families. But in April 1483, King Edward suddenly died. His oldest son, Edward, was only 12 years old. That meant the young prince would become King Edward V. At least, that was the plan. Because when a king is a child, someone else must rule until he grows up. That person is called the Protector. And the man chosen for that role was Edward's uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. At first, everything seemed normal. Richard rode out to meet his young nephew as the prince traveled to London for his coronation. But along the way, something changed. Richard arrested two of the prince's closest supporters, claiming they were plotting against him. Then he took control of the young king. Soon after, Edward and his younger brother Richard, who was only 9 years old, were taken to the Tower of London. Today, the tower is known as a prison, but in the 1400s it was also used as a royal residence. So at first people were not alarmed. The princes were said to be staying there while they prepared for Edward's coronation. But weeks passed, and the coronation never happened. Instead, Richard made a shocking announcement. He claimed that his brother, King Edward IV, had secretly promised to marry another woman before marrying the prince's mother, Elizabeth Woodville. If that claim were true, it meant Edward's marriage was invalid. And if the marriage was invalid, then the princes were illegitimate, which meant they could not inherit the throne. Suddenly, the two boys were no longer the rightful heirs to England. Richard was next in line. Soon after, Richard was crowned king. He became King Richard III. At this point, people began to whisper. The two princes were still in the tower, but fewer and fewer people saw them. At first, servants reported seeing the boys playing in the courtyard, looking out from the windows, walking together inside the fortress. Then, the sighting stopped. Completely. The princes were never seen again. No announcement was made. No explanation was given. They simply vanished. Naturally, suspicion quickly fell on the new king. Richard III had the most to gain. If the princes were alive, they could always challenge his claim to the throne. But if they were gone, Richard's position would be much safer. Many historians believe the boys were murdered inside the tower, possibly smothered in their beds. But here's the problem. There is no clear evidence, no official record of a murder, no confirmed witness, just rumors. And those rumors were often spread by Richard's enemies. One of those enemies was a man named Henry Tudor. Henry believed he also had a claim to the English throne. In 1485, just 2 years after the princes disappeared, Henry invaded England. He defeated Richard III in battle. Richard died on the battlefield, and Henry Tudor became King Henry VII. Now here is where the mystery deepens. Henry also had a reason to want the princes gone. If either boy were alive, Henry's claim to the throne would be very weak. Some historians believe the princes might have been killed after Henry took power. Others think the boys may have died earlier under Richard's rule. And then there are even stranger theories. Some people believe one of the princes may have escaped. Over the years, several men appeared claiming to be the lost Prince Richard. The most famous of them was a man named Perkin Warbeck. He convinced many people that he was the surviving prince. Even some European rulers supported his claim, but eventually Henry VII captured him, and Warbeck was executed. Still, the mystery refused to die. Nearly 200 years later, something unexpected happened. In 1674, workers at the Tower of London were removing an old staircase. While digging, they discovered a small wooden box buried underneath. Inside the box were the bones of 2 children. The bones were later placed in Westminster Abbey, where many English kings and queens are buried. Many people believed the remains belonged to the missing princes, but science at the time could not prove it. Even today, the bones have never been fully tested with modern DNA methods. Some historians want the remains studied again. Others believe the princes should be left to rest in peace. Who killed the princes? Was it their ambitious uncle, Richard III? Was it the future king, Henry VII? Was it a loyal supporter acting in secret? Or did something completely different happen? The truth may be buried somewhere in the past, just like the bones found in the tower. More than 5 centuries later, the disappearance of Edward V and his brother Richard remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in royal history. 2 young princes, a powerful throne, and a tower full of secrets. If you enjoyed this story and want to explore more strange and shocking moments from history, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, who do you think was responsible for the disappearance of the princes in the tower? Because in history, sometimes the biggest mystery is not what we know, but what we may never know.